see Brian Perry.
Yes.
To Brian's left, Ashley Cohen. And then you have
Haley Coolbath.
Haley Cohen. These are women and men
They kicked ass.
who from all walks of life. As I said earlier, James Brown made a song, it's a man's world, but it would be nothing without a woman and girl. Mrs. Cosby was that woman. For 57 years, the queen, the matriarch of the Cosby family, who fought for his vindication, who said he would be vindicated. And today, on this hot day, this is a hot verdict for us that we will forever cherish. Because we got one of the greatest, or the greatest entertainer alive today. Mr. Bill Cosby, this great American citizen, this American treasure, this icon with us today. I'm going to allow Ms. Bunjean to say a few words. Ms. Bunjean?
Yes, obviously we are thrilled to have Mr. Cosby home. He served 3 years of an unjust sentence.
Too long.
He did it with dignity and principle, and he was a mentor to other inmates. He was really, as I say, doing the time. The time was not doing him.
He's a classy man.
And I want to say this about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They demonstrated that they were impervious to the court of public opinion, which, frankly, the lower courts were not. Mr. Cosby, we knew all along he never should have been prosecuted for this. He had every right to rely on the prosecutor's word. And they pulled the rug out from underneath him because of politics, because of the court of public opinion, and that is not how our system should operate.
Absolutely.
When that happens, there cannot be a just sentence. And if there had been a just verdict and a just sentence, we wouldn't be here fighting. But there was not a just sentence and not a just verdict. And I think it's really important that we keep our eye on the ball, that our Constitution is sacred, and that we need to uphold it at all times. And I'm glad that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court saw it the way we did.
Brian Perry.
I'm very proud of the team that we put together. Very proud to be part of this case. We always thought that eventually this is where it would end up. Mr. Cosby and I had many, many talks over the last couple of years. I predicted it, and we're here. It's a good day for the Cosby family.
Mr. Cosby, how does it feel to be home?
Well, he is extremely happy to be home. He looks forward to reuniting with his wife and his children. And obviously, this has been a hard 3 years for this entire family. And it's really a blessing for him. And he says, his heart is just beating really fast, and he's happy to be here.
And we have Ashley here who worked on the case. Ashley, say a few words. Ashley Cohen.
I'm just honored to be part of such an amazing team. These lawyers did an incredible job, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it and to help Mr. Cosby, and I'm just proud to be here and watch him get released.
And this wonderful attorney, Haley, you see right here. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Her father
Yes.
was in prison with Mr. Cosby. And he sent a message to Mr. Cosby before he left today for her. Say a few words.
He did. He said he loves me very, very much. And I...
What's your father's name?
Richard. And I in return love him very, very much in return, and I was glad that Mr. Cosby and him got to know each other while incarcerated together, and I'm blessed and so grateful to be here to see Mr. Cosby be released.
And in closing, this was an unwanted 3-year vacation that Mr. Cosby never asked for. But in hindsight, we're happy that he got it because he was able to pull the covers off of the corruption in Montgomery County with the crooked DA, with the crooked judge, Steele and O'Neill. These same people find this man, this American citizen. I don't know how a DA has that much time on his hands to fine him $2,010 for not cutting his yard. I was on the way to pay that fine when I got a call from Nick DeHatt, and Nick told me that they had vacated the conviction. What we saw today was justice for all Americans. Mr. Cosby conviction being overturned is for the world and all Americans who are being treated unfairly by the judicial system and some bad officers, because all officers are not bad. So we want to thank this entire team. We want to thank Mrs. Cosby, her family. I want to thank my family. And just thank you all for those who decided to tell the truth and allowed us to tell the truth when we had the opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Cosby, how you feeling?
Are you happy to be
Green.
out?
Shit. How does he feel? He's feeling green. Nick, you better do right here when you make this video.
What a surreal moment right there outside of the home there of Bill Cosby as his attorneys celebrating there. And it should be known there that this was overturned, and not because of his innocence, but because of technicality in the prosecution's way of getting to this case in the first hand there. So Bill Cosby now walking back to his home there after being released earlier today, and what a news moment that was when we first brought you that. Really, all day today, we've been covering this for you. A big day here on News Now from Fox. I do want to bring in maybe just some of the coverage from our station, Fox 29 in Philadelphia. Let's just see what they have to say to provide some context. We'll continue to showcase the breaking news elements right here.
And again, we didn't hear a word from him. He seemed to be relieved. He looked to be taking just a sigh of relief, a lot of nodding in agreement and pleasant expressions on his face, but not a word from him. It was pretty loud, as you could hear. There are, in addition to Cosby and his team, there's a lot of press there, but there are a lot of supporters there celebrating this decision. There are also a lot of protesters fighting it. They're not happy about this. Certainly a triggering day for a lot of people in this country. There are so many angles to this story. Of course, this case, the trials, the twists and turns of this whole story. It's been a lot. It's pretty complex, but we are going to break that down as best as we can coming up at 5 o'clock and throughout the evening. You can also find the latest on your Fox 29 app and on fox29.com.
All right, we will check back in with Fox 29 in about 13 minutes, everyone, here on this major story there. You can still see Bill Cosby still celebrating with his attorneys there, getting out on a technicality today. And what we'll do is, while we have it, let's take another quick 2-minute break here on News Now from Fox. Stay right here with us. About 12 minutes away, we'll take you out to that Fox 29 coverage as they will have several reporters here on this case, on this story as well. Welcome back, everyone, here to News Now from Fox here. We thought we were going to hear from Bill Cosby. He really didn't say anything. He was just smiling and waving his hand there as his attorneys really did all of the talking here. We continue to follow this coverage here. About 11 minutes away, we'll take you out to some of the coverage from Fox 29 in Philadelphia as this was the big story here of the day. Roving camera right here, live, raw, and unfiltered as always here on News Now from Fox here, and others will be getting ready as well. We continue to follow all the major stories here throughout the day on this very, very busy day, and we'll see if there's going to be any maybe supporters or somebody that is against Bill Cosby to talk here as well. We did hear them in the background, so it'll be interesting to see if maybe one of the members of the media could get those sound bites there. But we'll keep an eye on everything as always for you here on News Now from Fox, everyone. I'm going to read just a little bit more of some of the opinions there from Supreme Court of Pennsylvania justices talking about this decision to overturn this on a technicality. It continues on, saying within days of filing their police report, Constant received 2 telephone messages from people associated with Cosby. The first message was from one of Cosby's assistants calling on Cosby's behalf to invite Constant and her mother to Cosby's upcoming performance in Miami, Florida. She then called the representative back and recorded the call. The representative asked for certain details about Constant and her mother so that he could book flights and hotel rooms for them. She declined the offer and did not provide the requested information. Constant then received a message from one of Cosby's attorneys who stated that he was calling to discuss the creation of a trust that Cosby wanted to set up in order to provide financial assistance for her education. Constant never returned the attorney's call there, and this opinion does continue to go on here. But let's go back really into the meat of it. In February of 2004, then District Attorney Castor reviewed Constant's interviews and Cosby's written answers in order to, looks like we just went black there. I'm trying to follow all these different developments here, but what we'll do is just show you this video while I continue to read off here. In DA's Castor's view, such a delay diminished the reliability of any recollections and undermined the investigators' efforts to collect forensic evidence. Moreover, DA Castor identified a number of inconsistencies in Constant's various statements to investigators. After Cosby provided his written answers, police officers searched his home and found no evidence that, in their view, could be used to confirm or corroborate Constant's allegations. Following the search of Cosby's home, she was interviewed by police again. District Attorney Castor noted that there were inconsistencies in that interview, which further impaired Constant's credibility in his eyes. He also learned that before she contacted the police in Canada, Constant had contacted civil attorneys in Philadelphia, likely for the purpose of pursuing financial compensation in a lawsuit against Cosby. Additionally, according to the District Attorney Castor, the behavior in the year since the alleged assault complicated any effort to secure a conviction against Cosby. As evidenced by the number of telephone calls that she recorded, Constant continued to talk with Cosby on the phone, and she also continued to meet with him in person after the incident. District Attorney then found these recurring interactions between a complaint and an alleged perpetrator to be atypical. DA Castor also reasoned that the recordings likely were illegal and included discussions that could be interpreted as attempts by Constant and her mother to get Cosby to pay that she would not contact the authorities. The totality of these circumstances ultimately led DA Castor to conclude that there was insufficient credible and admissible evidence upon which any charge against Cosby related to the incident could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt there. And folks, we are about 6 minutes away from Fox 29's coverage out in Philadelphia. We will provide you that. While we do have another shot at it, we'll take another quick 2-minute break.
start with breaking news. Bill Cosby is out of prison and back at home.
Right here.
204.
And today, on this hot day, this is a hot verdict for us that we will forever cherish.
Bill, give us a few words. Just say a few words.
And those were the only words. That was the only word we've heard for the majority of that press conference. He sort of just stood and nodded in agreement, made a lot of expressive facial expressions. But that's all he said. 204, waving, threw up the peace sign after standing there with his team outside his home. This is in Elkins Park, just outside of the city of Philadelphia, and just hours after his conviction was overturned. He arrived at home about 3:30 this afternoon. All of this after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his sexual assault conviction this afternoon. We have team coverage on this stunning development. I'm Shayna Humphreys.
And I'm Chris O'Connell, live at the Montgomery County Courthouse in Norristown. This is where the criminal case all started. Lots to unpack this afternoon. Let's go to the Sky Fox of over Bill Cosby's house. His legal team, his associates just spoke with the media just a few minutes ago. We did not hear from Bill Cosby. He was wearing what it looked like was his prison jumpsuit and his Central High School T-shirt. So lots to unpack on this stunning afternoon in the Bill Cosby case. Shayna.
All right. Thank you, Chris. We want to get out to Jenny Joyce now, who has been sort of stationed outside Cosby's house in Elkins Park, along with a lot of other members of the media, along with quite a few supporters. They're celebrating this decision today, as well as quite a few protesters who are deeply upset by what has happened, by the fact that he is there at home and is now free. He has been in that prison. He had been staying in a state prison for more than 2 years after being convicted. But of course, today, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court says the trial in which he was convicted never should have happened in the first place. So due to procedural errors, he shouldn't have been charged, and that is why he is now free. We're looking live from Sky Fox down at his home. Let's get out to Jenny now. I know it's so chaotic there, she can probably barely hear herself think, but hopefully we can hear her speak. Okay, it looks like you found a bit of a quiet spot. Jenny?
Yeah, good evening, Shayna. We are on the backside of Bill Cosby's property, and this is where he and his team addressed the media a short time ago. You can take a look. There's media from all over here. I believe we have some video to share of Bill Cosby arriving home mid-afternoon. I believe it was around 3:30 this afternoon when he returned home from the state correctional facility. Again, a short time ago, he did come out here to address the media. He was wearing a white T-shirt. He did not say anything. It was his spokesperson, Andrew Wyatt, as well as his attorneys who did all of this speaking. Andrew Wyatt, what he said, what we saw today was justice for all Americans. Mr. Cosby's conviction overturned is for the world. Well, Mr.
Obviously, we are thrilled to have Mr. Cosby home. He served 3 years of an unjust sentence.
Too long.
He did it with dignity and principle, and he was a mentor to other inmates. He was really, as I say, doing the time. The time was not doing him.
He's a classy man.
And I want to say this about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They demonstrated that they were impervious to the court of public opinion.
Okay, so there you could hear a little bit of sound there. I believe that was from the press conference earlier today. While Bill Cosby did not speak again, his attorney saying that he is just happy to be home. They believe that this is justice in this case. Happy to be reunited with his wife and his children. As I had mentioned, on the front side of the property, we saw protesters as well as supporters out here for Mr. Bill Cosby. Shayna?
All right, Jenny Joyce, thank you so much. Let's go to Joanne Pileggi now. She is live outside the prison in Collegeville, where Bill Cosby had been serving his sentence for over 2 years. Joanne, what have you seen there today?
A lot of activity. This had been Bill Cosby's home for the better part of the last 3 years, in a cell, behind bars, and barbed wire here at the State Correctional Institute at Phoenix, formerly Graterford Prison in the rolling hills of Montgomery County. But that all changed today with that stunning judicial decision that was handed down, that became public, and Bill Cosby left here a free man.
Mr. Cosby.
The 83-year-old Cosby was convicted of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault in April of 2018 and sentenced 3 to 10 years for the crimes. The victim, Andrea Constand, settled a civil suit against Cosby in which he admitted drugging and having consensual sex at his home. But his attorney successfully argued that Cosby brokered an agreement with the former prosecutor, Bruce Castor, that he would not be tried in criminal court, all of which eventually happened when Cosby's testimony in his civil case became public. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided to vacate Cosby's conviction based on the agreement he apparently had with the prosecutor. The court also mentioned the fact that other victims were called to testify against Cosby during his criminal trial. Upon hearing the stunning news, several people showed up at the prison. They offered different opinions on the high court decision.
It is the best day. Somebody's getting released from something they didn't do. People have been accusing people left and right. Oh, you did this. You're standing here. What are you doing here? And then all of a sudden, nobody's doing nothing. Nobody did nothing wrong.
Well, it's great that the rich people get to have nice sweetheart deals like that where they don't get prosecuted, where normal people like you and I would just be thrown in jail and forgotten about. So I think it's ridiculous, to be honest with you. It's quite sad. I'm tired of this PA Supreme Court and decisions they've been making recently. This is definitely one of them.
Certainly, there will be no shortage of opinions in this bombshell case that involved a beloved celebrity, comedian, actor who had a big fall from grace. Cosby left here around 2:30 this afternoon. We're live in Montgomery County. I'm Joanne Pileggi, Fox 29 News. Back to you, Shayna.
All right, thank you, Joanne. Montgomery County District Attorney Kevin Steele released a statement. It reads in part, he was found guilty by a jury and now goes free on a procedural issue that is irrelevant to the facts of the crime. My hope is that this decision will not dampen the reporting of sexual assaults by victims. Prosecutors in my office will continue to follow the evidence wherever and to whomever it leads. We still believe that no one is above the law, including those who are rich, famous, and powerful. Reaction to the news has been pouring in from Hollywood. Felicia Rashad, who played Cosby's TV wife, you probably know her better as Claire Huxtable, she tweeted, "Finally, a terrible wrong is being righted. A miscarriage of justice is corrected." Her words have received thousands of supporters and quite a bit of backlash as well on social media. Let's head out to our analyst, Bruce Gordon now. He is joining us live. And Bruce, you were a longtime Fox 29 News reporter before you became an analyst for us, and you covered this trial and everything that's happened since extensively. Kind of briefly explain, how did we arrive at this point today?
That's the challenge, briefly. Yeah, this has been a huge controversy in Montgomery County for better than 15 years. Let's go back to 2005 and the mindset of then District Attorney Bruce Castor. Castor believed at that time that the criminal case against Bill Cosby, the allegation by Andrea Constand, would not survive a criminal trial. That is to say, Castor did not believe he could get a conviction against Cosby. And so what he decided to do, and again, this is based on his own testimony, his own writings, and his own comments, Castor believed the best he could do for Andrea Constand was to try and help her civil case that would then be filed after it was clear he was not going to go forward with the criminal case. And so he said to the Cosby team, I will not prosecute you criminally, nor will any of my successors. It will not happen. Not now, not ever. In exchange, you no longer then have the Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination. You would be compelled then to offer a deposition in the civil case that is sure to come from Andrea Constand. Cosby relied on that information and agreed to the deposition. That deposition testimony ultimately was used against him in the trial that led to his conviction in 2018. In essence, the High Court in Pennsylvania said, whether Bruce Castor had the authority to act, as Castor put it, as the sovereign of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in making this decision that no one forevermore could prosecute Cosby criminally, whether or not he had that authority, Cosby believed him to be sincere. And so he acted in that belief. Cosby agreed to the deposition only because he was told you will not be prosecuted. So what happens? Years later, Kevin Steele, running against Bruce Castor, who was trying to get his old job back, made much of that issue of, hey, Cosby went free because Bruce Castor fouled up this investigation. Steele went forward with the prosecution, ultimately convicted Cosby, and the High Court in Pennsylvania today said that was unfair, a violation of due process. What it does not say is that Bill Cosby is innocent of these charges. That issue is unaddressed here. This was a simple matter of violation of due process, not a legal technicality. These are serious rights that we all have. But again, not an exoneration of Bill Cosby by any means either.
Yeah, Bruce, all of this started a little bit before the Me Too movement began, and it's sort of ending right in the middle of it, shortly after it sort of kicked off. Do you think the movement had any impact on any of this?
Well, it is interesting, Shana, because think about this. One of the reasons that Bruce Castor, actually a couple of the reasons Bruce Castor did not go forward with a criminal prosecution way back when was A, that the incident was not reported by Andrea Constand particularly promptly, and B, she maintained a conversational relationship with Bill Cosby even after the incident. Those two elements convinced Castor he could likely not get a conviction. Nowadays, we might have juries viewing that differently.
Yeah, it seems like a sure thing if that were to happen. Well, thank you so much, Bruce, for breaking that down for us. We'll see you later.
My pleasure.
Well, don't go anywhere. We have a lot more coverage, a lot more angles to cover. Bill Cosby's release from prison, and you can always get the latest breaking updates as they're happening in real time by just scanning that QR code. Just point your phone camera at it on your screen. That'll take you straight to download our free Fox 29 News app. And in other news, let's take a live.
All right, so we've been listening in with Fox 29. As you heard, they've been doing full coverage, having their team out there in full force, covering this breaking news that happened earlier here this morning. And there's been a lot of reaction pouring in from across the country as this news has unfolded. Let's go out to an interview that KTTV did as they talk about what this means for victims, not only in the past, but in the future, what it might do for them as they try to come forward. So let's go into that. Again, this is coming to us from our Fox 11 station.
All right, joining me now to discuss this legal development is attorney Lisa Bloom, who represents 3 of Cosby's victims. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us this noon. Let's get your reaction to this really stunning news. Oh, we're having a hard time.
Sorry.
No, that's
okay. This is really a kick in the gut to all of the victims. It's just an absolute shock. I remember taking my client Janice Dickinson to that criminal trial in 2018 where she testified as one of the prior bad acts witnesses, and how excruciating that was to her to be subjected to a brutal cross-examination. She did beautifully. The other victims did too. And of course, Andrea Constand, the primary victim in that case, was just magnificent. And now this, years later, after everything the victims have gone through, and it's based on a technicality because a prior prosecutor had promised Cosby that he wouldn't be prosecuted without even getting an agreement for him to do jail time. I mean, it's just an absolutely stunning outcome.
Yeah, and as mentioned, you do represent 3 of Mr. Cosby's victims. Have you actually been in touch with them this morning, this afternoon?
Yes, and everyone is just completely disgusted and feels that they have been undermined in their efforts for so many years to get justice. People have been trying for 20 years to bring Bill Cosby to justice, and this one criminal trial that happened and got a relatively mild sentence of 3 to 10 years was just this little bit of justice that we were able to get, and now that has been taken away.
What's next? Is there any recourse?
Well, there is always the civil system, and that's the system that I work in. I represent dozens and dozens of sexual assault victims today against many high-profile predators like Jeffrey Epstein. And we do get victories on the civil side, as we did. We got a big victory in Janice Dickinson's defamation case that we filed against Bill Cosby, although we had to fight his attorneys for 4 years. So any victims who have not yet come out against Bill Cosby and who may have a timely claim, I strongly encourage to reach out to an attorney as soon as possible, find out what your rights are, because although for Andrea Constand, this is the end and he's going to be freed, you know, there are over 60 women who have come forward. And if anybody else has claims that may have taken place in the last 5 or 10 years, they may still have an opportunity to seek justice.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to put on your legal analysis cap for us and make sense of, because to the average person, this doesn't make sense. So can you explain, does this happen often in the legal system where something like this, on a case like this, gets overturned?
This is a 1 in a million ruling, and it's a very strange set of facts. It begins with a former Pennsylvania DA named Bruce Castor, who years ago promised Bill Cosby he would not prosecute him. And then after that, Bill Cosby was forced to testify in a civil case in a deposition, and he made incriminating statements like that he had given women quaaludes in order to encourage them to have sex with him. Those statements were then used against him when a second DA brought the criminal case against him. So the court says there's a fundamental constitutional unfairness to Bill Cosby because that promise had been made to him. Based on that promise, he testified in the civil case, and then those statements were used against him. Bill Cosby has the same constitutional rights as everybody else, and he had a Fifth Amendment right not to testify unless the prosecutor promised him he wouldn't be prosecuted. So I do understand it from a legal point of view, but boy, just taking a step back and thinking about the victims, it's just an awful, awful day. And that prosecutor should never have made that promise in the first place without getting jail time in exchange. And that's what he did.
And to think that Mr. Cosby was just denied parole not long ago, last month in May. That also happened. I want to get your reaction to Felicia Rashad's tweet. I'm not trying to single her out necessarily, but of course, Mr. Cosby does have some supporters out there. So what is your message to people who still support him?
More than 60 women have come forward. If even half of them are telling the truth, and I think, they're all telling the truth. He is one of the most prolific predators of our time. Believe the women. If there were 1 or 2 women, we could say maybe there's a real dispute here. When 60 women have come forward, come on. And I would also say to Ms. Rashad that this is not an exoneration. This is not a finding of innocence. It's a simple legal technicality that his lawyers were able to exploit to get him free today.
And then let me ask you on the flip side, for sexual assault victims who may be watching this interview, there's the fear that something like this would perhaps silence them, dampen their spirits, and maybe prevent them from coming forward in your message?
I hope it's exactly the opposite. I hope that sexual assault victims will come forward, call an attorney, find out what your rights are. This is a very unusual case with a weird set of facts from what a prosecutor did a long time ago. But we get victories for victims every day, and there are many very brave people who continue to step forward. So don't be discouraged by one bad outcome.
All right. Attorney Lisa Bloom, thank you so much for your valuable time today.
Thank you.
All right. And as she mentioned, there is a lot of other high profile cases now with these victims who now they're worried that those cases might also be starting to try to look for something similar to happen with them, like the Harvey Weinstein case. We are going to be having a Gloria Allred press conference. She's going to be hosting a Zoom press conference, giving some statements based off of what happened earlier here this morning in just about 15 minutes or so. So, of course, once that does happen, we'll bring it to you here on News Now from Fox. But let's go ahead and take a quick 2-minute break. And when we return, more coverage with Fox 29 on Bill Cosby being released from prison today. Welcome back here to News Now from Fox. Christy Larson here at the desk with you again. When this all broke earlier this morning outside of that prison, you heard both sides, not only people celebrating, but also protesters out there. But one of those people who we've been showing you their tweets has been Bill Cosby's TV wife. So she did have this tweet out earlier here today saying, finally, a terrible wrong is being righted. A miscarriage of justice is corrected. You heard recently just that tweet being talked about again, that this is not meaning that he's innocent. Again, it was technical issues and grounds that he had been released from prison. So what we're going to do is continue our coverage with our Fox 29 Philadelphia team.
Is a free man. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his sexual assault conviction today after Cosby served more than 2 years behind bars. The court explained its ruling, saying the prosecutor who brought the case should have been bound by his predecessor's agreement. So an agreement made between Cosby and a former prosecutor not to charge Cosby in criminal court. The former Cosby Show star was found guilty of drugging and sexually assaulting Temple University sports administrator Andrea Constand at his suburban Philadelphia home back in 2004. But today the court said Cosby relied on former district attorney Bruce Castor's decision not to charge him when he agreed to give potentially incriminating testimony in the case. After hearing today's decision, there is very mixed reaction.
It is the best day. Somebody's getting released from something they didn't do. People have been accusing people left and right. Oh, you did this. You're standing here. What are you doing here? And then all of a sudden, nobody's doing nothing. Nobody did nothing wrong.
Well, it's great that the rich people get to have nice sweetheart deals like that where they don't get prosecuted, where normal people like you and I would just be thrown in jail and forgotten about. So I think it's ridiculous, to be honest with you. It's quite sad.
Bill Cosby joined his legal team there and his spokesman this afternoon after he returned home. He didn't speak himself at first, threw up a peace sign, sort of nodded in agreement, and later said just 204. Still unclear what that means. Aside from his role in the Cosby case, Bruce Castor, though, that might sound familiar to you. His name? Well, he was one of President Trump's impeachment lawyers and played a very big role in his legal defense after the insurrection, the attack on the U.S. Capitol back on January 6th. Today's stunning reversal comes as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that the prosecutor who brought the case was bound by his predecessor's agreement not to charge Cosby. So here to look into that further, explain what that really means and what, if anything, comes next is legal expert Joe Marone. Thanks for joining us today, Joe.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to be speaking with you today. This is such a complex case that's been going on for so long. So there's reportedly no evidence that this promise was made years ago that Cosby would not be charged, and yet that's what today's major decision, this reversal, was based on. How do you explain that?
Well, I think Cosby won on the law, right? They reverted back to when Castor was investigating the case back in 2005. He thoroughly went through the case. There wasn't really sufficient evidence to prosecute Cosby. You got to remember, he was an icon and even bigger back then. So if you're going to prosecute somebody at that level, you want to make sure that you have a compelling case. It wasn't there, and he made a public announcement that he wasn't going to prosecute. But the underlying reason why he did it was to give Andre Constant some relief under the law, which was through civil remedies. So they basically allowed Cosby to testify in depositions where he would incriminate himself. So since he relied on the fact that Castor said, hey, we're not going to prosecute, you can waive your Fifth Amendment right, he moved forward and complied with the civil case and went into a deposition and gave incriminating statements, which ultimately became the linchpin to get him arrested and potentially convicted.
It's just fascinating that the agreement was reportedly made with Andrea Constand in mind. I guess hindsight is 2020. Part of that agreement is also reportedly that he is barred from any further conviction, that there's no chance that he will have to face charges again in the future. So is that true to you? Is this whole chapter in Cosby's life officially over?
That is correct. The Supreme Court basically put Cosby to where he would have been if, when he relied on Castor's agreement that he wouldn't prosecute criminally, that's where he went back to. So at the end of the day, the state can do nothing at this time. You know, if you want to take a look at the case, did the victim get any relief or any pound of flesh? Well, he served time in jail. He lost his reputation. but he's not going to be prosecuted criminally. He cannot be prosecuted criminally. In fact, he may have a civil claim against the state, but that's a whole nother issue. And the interesting thing in this case, which everybody thought was going to be a hot issue, which was a hot issue, was allowing all the other witnesses to testify against them. They didn't rule on that because obviously this trumped that, and that issue became moot. But it was very prejudicial in this case, and that's what I thought was going to happen in this case. I thought it was going to be remanded for a new trial because the trial judge allowed too many witnesses to testify who experienced similar situations, such as Ms. Constant.
And that's a wrap. All right. Joe Marone, thank you so much for joining us.
You got it.
And here is a live look chopper flying above the area again where they were just over Bill Cosby's house, giving us that look. And what we're going to do is, of course, continue to have you covered on this breaking news story. I'm going to send some of you off into a quick 2-minute break. But again, we are waiting for Gloria Allred. She is supposed to be hosting a quick press conference. She's going to be giving out a statement as she is talking about what this means really for these sexual assault victims who had been brave enough to step out and talk about what happened to them. Again, her press conference is set to be started here in about less than 5 minutes. So some of you are going to see a 2-minute commercial break, and when you return, hopefully that press conference will be underway. And welcome back here to News Now from Fox. We continue to have you fully covered as, again, this big breaking news happened earlier this morning that Bill Cosby is released from prison. He has made his way home. And earlier here today, his attorneys and family spokespeople did step out in front of the camera. Bill Cosby himself did also come out, but he did not say any words. Let's go back to some of those moments. And as I mentioned, Gloria Allred's supposed to be hosting a press conference talking about what this means on the other side of the issue for those victims. So let's listen into what Bill Cosby's attorneys and family spokespeople had to say. Again, then we'll be getting into that Gloria Allred press conference for you right here on News Now from Fox.
204. Okay, everybody. We want to thank the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, as I mentioned earlier, for reviewing Mr. Cosby's appeal, but also seeing the light, seeing the lies, seeing that Mr. Cosby had immunity. This U.S. citizen who served our country in the Navy, not just in the Navy, but he served our country in so many different ways through his celebrity, him and Mrs. Cosby. Mr. Cosby has always used his celebrity, his name, his likeness to uplift women. This is a man who refused to perform at the White House with Nixon. Nixon put him on a communist list in the 60s, along with so many other great names like Dick Gregory, Jane Fonda. How could a man who was being watched by the FBI every day be raping and drugging women in the 60s or 70s, especially a black man? Today, innocence came to Mr. Cosby with the help of these wonderful attorneys. To his right, you will see Ms. Jennifer Bunjean. She argued the appeal. To my left, you see Brian Perry. To Brian's left, Ashley Cohen. And then you have
Haley Coolbath.
Haley Coolbath. These are women and men who from all walks of life. As I said earlier, James Brown made a song, "It's a man's world, but it would be nothing without a woman and girl." Mrs. Cosby was that woman. For 57 years, the queen, the matriarch of the Cosby family, who fought for his vindication, who said he would be vindicated. And today, on this hot day, this is a hot verdict for us that we will forever cherish, because we got one of the greatest, or the greatest entertainer alive today. Mr. Bill Cosby, this great American citizen, this American treasure, this icon with us today. I'm going to allow Ms. Bunjean to say a few words. Ms. Bunjean?
Yes, obviously we are thrilled to have Mr. Cosby home. He served 3 years of his unjust sentence.
Too long.
And he did it with dignity and principle, and he was a mentor to other inmates. He was really, as I say, doing the time. The time was not doing him.
He's a classy man.
And I want to say this about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They demonstrated that they were impervious to the court of public opinion, which, frankly, the lower courts were not. Mr. Cosby, we knew all along he never should have been prosecuted for this. He had every right to rely on the prosecutor's word. And they pulled the rug out from underneath him because of politics, because of the court of public opinion, and that is not how our system should operate. When that happens, there cannot be a just sentence. And if there had been a just verdict and a just sentence, we wouldn't be here fighting. But there was not a just sentence and not a just verdict. And I think it's really important that we keep our eye on the ball, that our Constitution is sacred, and that we need to uphold it at all times. And I'm glad that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court saw it the way we did.
Brian Perry.
I'm very proud of the team that we put together, very proud to be part of this case. We always thought that eventually this is where it would end up. Mr. Cosby and I had many, many talks over the last couple of years. I predicted it, and we're here. It's a good day for the Cosby family.
Mr. Cosby, how does it feel to be home?
Well, he is extremely happy to be home. He looks forward to reuniting with his wife and his children. And obviously, this has been a hard 3 years for this entire family. And it's really a blessing for him. And he says, his heart is just beating really fast, and he's happy to be here.
And we have Ashley here who worked on the case. Ashley, say a few words.
Andrew, can you step back a little bit?
I'm honored to be part of such an amazing team. These lawyers did an incredible job, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it and to help Mr. Cosby, and I'm just proud to be here and watch him get released.
And this wonderful attorney, Haley, you see right here. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Her father was in prison with Mr. Cosby, and he sent a message to Mr. Cosby before he left today for her. Say a few words.
He did. He said that he loved me very, very much. And
What's your father's name?
Richard. And I, in return, love him very, very much in return, and I was glad that Mr. Cosby and him got to know each other while incarcerated together, and I'm blessed and so grateful to be here to see Mr. Cosby be released.
And in closing, this was an unwanted 3-year vacation that Mr. Cosby never asked for. But in hindsight, we're happy that he got it, because he was able to pull the covers off of the corruption in Montgomery County with the crooked DA, with the crooked judge, Steele and O'Neill. These same people find this man, this American citizen. I don't know how a DA has that much time on his hand to fine him $2,010 for not cutting his yard. I was on the way to pay that fine when I got a call from Nick the Hat. And Nick told me that they had vacated the conviction. What we saw today was justice. Justice for all Americans. Mr. Cosby's conviction being overturned It's for the world and all Americans who are being treated unfairly by the judicial system and some bad officers, because all officers are not bad. So we want to thank this entire team. We want to thank Mrs. Cosby, her family. I want to thank my family, and just thank you all for
set up a system so that both of them could be outside the circle for a little bit, get.
What we do have is this is a video from him returning home earlier here today. It does look like we do have Gloria Allred beginning her press conference. We're going to jump into that live here for you on News Now from Fox.
Bill Cosby. This must be devastating to many of the accusers, and my heart especially goes out to those who bravely testified in both of his criminal cases. I did represent a majority of the prior bad act witnesses who testified in both of the criminal cases against Bill Cosby. And they were very brave. And despite the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision, I want everyone to know that I do believe that this was a very important fight for justice. And even though the court did overturn the conviction, it was on technical grounds. It did not vindicate Bill Cosby's conduct, and it should not be interpreted as a statement or a finding that he did not engage in the acts of which he has been accused. And I'll be very happy to take any questions. And in addition, I did have an opportunity to speak to one of my clients who testified in the second criminal case, Janice Baker Kinney. And she said she was stunned by the decision. She is still processing it. And she and I will be speaking out tomorrow. So I'll be happy to take any questions if you would like to type them in. And I will be happy to respond to them. The first question is, do I think Mr. Cosby is still a danger to women? I'm not going to answer that question directly, but I will say this. Even though it does not appear that there are any other criminal cases that could be filed or prosecuted anywhere on behalf of any accuser, at least any that I have represented, I do believe or do represent that a civil case can proceed. And as a matter of fact, I do represent a very brave woman who has filed a civil lawsuit, and we are litigating that lawsuit in LA County Superior Court. And the case is Judy Huff versus Bill Cosby. And in that case, our client alleges in the lawsuit that she was the victim of child sexual abuse by Mr. Cosby at the Playboy Mansion in Southern California. That case has been stayed because both opposing counsel for Mr. Cosby and my law firm have agreed to stay the civil case for trial until the decision came down from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which it did today. We will be having a status conference with the court in Santa Monica in August, and we will be informing the court officially of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision to overturn the conviction. And we do expect that a date will be set for any further discovery and for trial of our case very soon by the court. Since we are going to be trying a case, I want to also say that we're going to be doing more discovery, and that will include a deposition of Mr. Cosby. We did take his deposition previously, deposition being his testimony under oath in this civil case. That deposition remains under seal, and so we cannot discuss what he said or failed to say in that deposition. However, based on that first deposition that he provided, we returned to court and made a motion to compel him to take a second deposition. In other words, to appear to answer questions under oath again. Over his objection, the court granted our motion to compel a second deposition of Mr. Cosby. However, the court stayed the taking of his deposition until such time as his criminal case concluded, which it did today. So that now that we can proceed to take his deposition, at some point, we will be taking his testimony under oath. And because his criminal case is now concluded, and because he is not in jeopardy of being criminally prosecuted, he will not be able to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination in our case. So he will be compelled to answer questions under oath in our case. That's a rather long answer to your question. Is he still a danger? But I think that's the best way for me to answer it. And the jury will decide if, as and when we get to trial in this case, what the jury believes based on the evidence in our case. So next question is, what does this mean? And this is for Michelle Kingston. What does this mean for accusers moving forward? I'm not sure if you're talking about accusers in the Bill Cosby case or accusers of Bill Cosby, or whether you are talking about just accusers in general. I'm going to just take the liberty of assuming that you mean accusers in general, accusers of rich, powerful, famous figures, and whether it might deter them, for example, from either filing police reports or filing lawsuits or both, or testifying in either criminal or civil cases or both. My opinion, based on my 46 years of practicing law, and as I've said, we are the leading women's rights law firm in the United States and have been for all that time, is that many, many victims will continue to have the courage to come forward and to file civil lawsuits against those who sexually assault or rape them or victimize them with child sexual abuse. They will file police reports. They will be willing to testify in many cases, both criminal and civil. And if they have support from victims' rights attorneys, from victims' advocates in the criminal justice system, they will know they're not alone, and they know that they have the power to help to win justice. I say that because I do represent many victims in pending criminal cases. I represent majority of victims in the R. Kelly case that is set for trial in August in the Eastern District of New York. I represent 2 victims in the Harvey Weinstein criminal case that in which Mr. Weinstein is set to be extradited very soon to Los Angeles for this criminal prosecution, which will take place here in Los Angeles, which is where I'm doing the Zoom right now. I believe that those witnesses and or victims who are set to testify will proceed despite this result in Bill Cosby's criminal case, and well, they should, because it's just a technical legal decision, even though it is an important constitutional issue. And I don't call constitutional issues technical, but it from a layperson's point of view, it's not a decision on the merits, is what I mean. So, no, we are going to continue to support them bravely. And I also represent a witness in the Cuba Gooding Jr. case, and I have every reason to believe she will proceed to testify as well. And on and on and on. So that's my hope. Of course, I've not had an opportunity to speak to all of my clients today who are either victims or witnesses in the criminal cases. Having said that, that's my educated guess, knowing them as I do, that they will not be deterred, and we will continue to fight on. So the next question is this decision a blow to the overall Me Too movement? Well, I've been doing the Me Too movement, so to speak, for 46 years. That's how long I've been bringing women to the justice system and helping to support them so that they can have their voice, so that they can be heard, both in the criminal and civil justice system and also even outside of the justice system. And so is this a blow to the Me Too movement? It's not a win, but it's certainly a moment in which we all understand that it's a long road to justice. And, you know, there are many roadblocks on the way. The justice system is not perfect. Laws are not perfect. Judges don't always make the right decisions. Prosecutors don't always make the right decisions. Lawyers don't always make the right decision. But because it's imperfect, that's not a reason to decide not to participate in it. We have to be brave. It takes all of us to win change. We have to not let fear paralyze us so that predators continue to prey on victims, hoping that they will be fearful that the system will not support them and therefore they shouldn't come forward. That would only give predators a license and an incentive to continue to prey on victims. And I don't think any of us want that. Okay. Can Cosby ever be tried again, even under different charges, asks Emily Valdez from KNX. I don't see that happening, but on the other hand, I can't say that I know every person who's ever filed a criminal complaint against Mr. Cosby, and where they filed it, and if they did, whether they're still within the statute, and if so, what the evidence is, and who the district attorney is, and what the decision would be. So I really don't know. I think it's unlikely, but that's my view. The next question from Bloomberg News is Bob Van Voris. Can you explain why criminal prosecutions based on the allegations of other women are unlikely? I'm going to make a guess that what you're referring to is the testimony of other witnesses, so-called prior bad act witnesses in Pennsylvania. In New York, by the way, they're called Molyneux witnesses. We have similar type of law in California, which allows testimony of other witnesses depending on whether they fit certain legal criteria. Other witnesses did testify in the Harvey Weinstein case. I represented the main victim in the criminal case against Mr. Weinstein, in which he was convicted of criminal sexual assault against my client, Mimi Haley, and he was sentenced to 20 years. I also represented two other witnesses in that case who testified. So the issue, by the way, of whether other witnesses, so-called Me Too witnesses or prior bad act witnesses or Molyneux witnesses, will be allowed to testify in the future, I want to say is a very important issue. It's not an issue that was decided by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court today. Matter of fact, the court made clear that they don't need to reach that issue or didn't need to reach that issue because they decided this case of Mr. Cosby based on what they decided was a non-prosecution agreement and that Mr. Cosby relied to his detriment on it and testified in the depositions in the civil case as a result. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret. I hope they don't. I saw some reporting that I think does misinterpret the issue having to do with other prior bad act witnesses. even though the court in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision seemed to indicate that they felt that the testimony of prior bad act witnesses may have tainted the trial. They didn't, I mean, that's really dicta because they didn't decide the case based on that. And they were clear on that at the end of their opinion. So I do hope and expect other witnesses will come forward to testify, perhaps in the Harvey Weinstein criminal case in California, perhaps elsewhere. I don't know. I'm not privy to who all the people that the prosecution is intending to or going to ask the court to allow to testify in the criminal case in Los Angeles. That's for the prosecution to announce or decide. But I do think that under certain circumstances, it's important. I will add finally to this, that the reason the prior bad act witnesses were allowed to testify in Pennsylvania in the criminal case of Mr. Cosby was to show what they call absence of mistake, to prove it. In other words, that Mr. Cosby could not have been mistaken about whether or not Ms. Constant consented to aggravated criminal sexual assault of her or indecent assault. He couldn't have been mistaken because he had a pattern of drugging and sexually assaulting women is the theory upon which that evidence was admitted. But I'll proceed. And so each case is different. Each case depends on the facts. It depends on the legal requirements to admit certain prior bad act or Me Too witness statements. And so I'm sure there are going to be many battles about that in the future. And no doubt Mr. Weinstein is raising that also on appeal. All right, so the next question is, did I find this to be an unfair trial? I didn't. Obviously, anyone who was convicted generally feels that the trial was unfair. I didn't feel that it was unfair. On the other hand, Pennsylvania Supreme Court obviously felt that Mr. Cosby's rights were violated for the reasons that they stated. Then next question from Robin is, given that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did not weigh in on guilt or innocence, but on technical grounds, will the overturned verdict have an effect on civil cases? Right now, the only civil case of which I'm aware is the case that I'm litigating in LA County Superior Court. Will it have an impact? Well, the answer is, in a way, yes. Because, and I can only speak to our case, because now Mr. Cosby will not be able to, from a legal point of view, invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. I'm translating that to say, in plain English, he will be required to answer our questions under oath, and he will not be able to say, I'm taking the Fifth, I decline to answer based on my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. So that's actually beneficial to us, and that's why, as I say, I'm looking forward to taking his deposition and really getting all the answers that we seek. So that's actually a positive for us. Now, what's the difference? Next question from Phil Schuman. What do you think was the difference between the Supreme Court's ruling versus the lower courts looking at the same evidence and circumstances and upholding the verdict? You know, I really haven't had an opportunity to compare them all, so I don't feel that that's a question that I can answer, but obviously they have the right, they have the last word. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court in Pennsylvania has the last word. Also, next question, let's see. What was my initial reaction, Kelly, to hearing that Cosby's conviction was overturned. It was really surprising. And as I say, Janice said she's still trying to process it. Janice Baker Kinney, my client, and it was stunning to her. And I was concerned at oral argument when I heard the questions that the justices were asking. I didn't feel that it would bode well for the ultimate decision. But you can never know based on questions of justices or judges what the ultimate decision is going to be. But it is what it is. And, with courts, and in life, the only thing you can really expect is the unexpected. And this is what it is. We will deal with it. We will move on. It's always 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards in the women's movement. But the good news is we're moving forward. We're not going to be deterred. And let's take the next question. I think that's, I think I've answered most of them. Let's see.
Looks like that's it.
I'm just going to say, I think I've answered most of the questions. So how many Cosby accusers do I represent? How many are there in total? I did represent 33. That's how many. How many are there total? I don't know, because some other people represent some others, and I don't know. Some people are also unrepresented. And some of them, by the way, some of the accusers that I've represented have never disclosed what happened to them, except to me. In other words, they didn't disclose to law enforcement in Pennsylvania, although many did. And of course, Bill Cosby's defense team verbally beat up on me because I did connect and plead guilty to connecting many accusers of Mr. Cosby to law enforcement in Pennsylvania, which I thought really was my moral duty. And I think law enforcement then can make the decision as to, what any weight that they think should be given to the accusations of any person who makes those accusations. But so I don't know how many there are, but I can tell you the full story in reference to allegations against Mr. Cosby has never been told. So let's see if there are any other questions, and then we will conclude. Okay, let's see. Okay, the question is, if there's only one civil lawsuit, will others be coming down the pike? I have no idea. I have no other idea whether anyone else intends to file a civil lawsuit, or if they do, whether they're within the statute of limitations to do so. Statute of limitations being that arbitrary time period set by law during which an accuser must file a lawsuit, or if she or he does not file it within the time period, they can file it, but then the defense will make, will make a motion to dismiss it. Statute of limitations is what we call an affirmative defense, and it will not be allowed to proceed if it is not within the time period set by law. I'm not going to begin to opine on what the time periods are, because they are different in every state. They're different for criminal cases. They're different for civil cases. The statute of limitations has been changing. I testified in 3 states, California, Colorado, and Nevada, and we were successful in either changing or eliminating the statute of limitations because many of my clients who were accusers of Mr. Cosby testified about the need to change or eliminate statute of limitations. How those changes will affect any future cases involving Mr. Cosby, I can't tell yet. it's complicated, and I just don't have an answer on any of that. But the point is, Mr. Cosby is not home free. I've not had an opportunity to see the press conference by Mr. Cosby's spokesperson or defense team. I just heard that somehow there was an allegation of political corruption in reference to his prosecution. That is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. And I think it's just ridiculous. And let's see, if there's one last question, then we will conclude. I think that's it. I would say to all of the victims who are listening to me, whether it's a person who believes that they were victimized in some way by Mr. Cosby or victimized by any other person, even if the person was not rich, powerful, or famous, whether it's a person that you know, a father, a stepfather, a stranger, a rabbi, a priest, a minister, a teacher, a coach, or political figure, or anyone else in your life who has victimized you, just keep up your courage and fight on. Failure is impossible. Thank you. This concludes the news conference.
All right, so there we have it. Some words there from Gloria Allred, and you can see here also this is his accuser's statement after this breaking news happened this morning. She did say today's majority decision regarding Bill Cosby is not only disappointing, but of concern in that many discourage those who seek justice for sexual assault in the criminal justice system from reporting or participating in the prosecution of the assailant. We're going to have more coverage for you right here on News Now from Fox after a quick 2-minute break.